All right, welcome back to the Living Life Well show. So, if you were with us last time, you heard me say that we're starting a new series based upon what food should I eat. This week, I'm excited to bring to you what should I eat for my thyroid. So, thyroid disease, as many of you know, is very, very widespread. We have hyperthyroidism, an over-functioning thyroid gland, or hypothyroidism, which is much, much more common and is an under-functioning thyroid gland. Well, food can play a significant role in how little function is taking place in the case of hypothyroidism and or possibly in hyper as well. So let's get right into it because there's also a big autoimmune component with either type. And we really want to make sure that we are focusing on true good nutrition, regardless of the type of thyroid disease that you may be suffering with. So before we jump in there, let's just talk a little bit about the thyroid in general. The thyroid is really located here in the neck. The TSH, or the thyroid stimulating hormone, is a signal from the brain that tells the thyroid to make more hormone, or thyroxine, or T4. And so this is really what we're going to be discussing today, that T4, how it gets converted to the T3, what helps that process or inhibits that process, and what other building blocks are needed along the way. So the most common nutrition plans actually for thyroid involve stabilizing the blood sugar and reducing inflammation and supporting gut health. The foundations really of all health that we see right now with all these chronic diseases, whether it's thyroid, diabetes, irritable bowel syndrome, many of these diseases are rooted in establishing good practices around these three areas: blood sugar, inflammation, and gut health. So what we need to do is really optimize the nutrients that are being consumed on a regular basis so that we can make sure that we're reducing those autoimmune triggers and also really getting the substrates that we need to allow for that conversion of T4 to T3, which is the active form of the thyroid hormone. Okay, so first of all, we need to look at protein. Protein is going to be very important. And the reason is there's a couple of different proteins that are involved with the thyroid gland. But protein is also important because of muscle preservation. As our muscle mass goes down, thyroid function tends to go down, metabolic rate tends to go down, and blood sugar stability tends to go down as well. So really good options that are packed with multiple of the nutrients that we need with regards to protein aspects are going to be eggs, actually. Eggs and dairy are going to be two of the big sources that are going to be really beneficial for us when it comes to our thyroid health. In addition, seafood, fish is going to be very important as well. And so fish is really, there's varied as to what people say here, but traditional thinking with regards to fish is going to be looking at like salmon and sardines and trout. And the reason is because they're going to provide those helpful omega-3 fats, and then also selenium, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But when you're looking at dairy, really what you're talking about is more kind of the Greek yogurt. That's going to be beneficial as well. So why are we starting with protein? Well, I mentioned that there are a couple of different proteins. There's thyroglobulin, okay? And then there's thyroxine-binding globulin. Two different proteins, both associated with the thyroid. You heard that thyro prefix on both of them. So let's talk about why this is. So the thyroglobulin is kind of a factory protein, if you will, inside the thyroid gland, and it's used to build the hormones, while the thyroxine-binding globulin is the transport. It's what that T4 takes a ride on to get to where it needs to go to start working. And so you really need both. They're both made of globulin. Globulin is a type of protein. And so these are going to be very important. And now you can see why you really want to make sure that you have plenty of protein. If you have low protein, it can translate into low thyroglobulin or low thyroxine-binding globulin. This is why when people are eating more of a lower protein diet, it can become an issue. Now, if you have too much protein, that can also be an issue because you can have too much of that thyroid hormone bound to that thyroxine-binding globulin and not enough free floating around. And so that could be an issue as well. Pretty rare, but it can be. And so this is why you want to make sure that you have a good level of protein, but not too much and not too little. So they're really important with the liver, and so maintaining good liver health is important as well, is because the liver is really involved with our protein distribution and usage. So that's a little bit about the protein aspects of the thyroid and why you need to really focus there. Now, selenium. Selenium is something that we mentioned just a little bit ago, specifically when talking about some specific foods. And so selenium, what it does is it converts that T4 that the thyroid makes to the T3, and it reduces thyroid inflammation. And so there are a lot of good sources of selenium, and so Brazil nuts is going to be important. Again, looking at the fish aspect, here you're going to find more selenium in really looking at tuna, but then sardines as well. And so really probably the best source of selenium with regards to fish is going to be things like yellowfin tuna. Now, this brings me to something I like to talk about when we're talking about fish. So, there's kind of farmed fish, there's wild-caught fish. Wild-caught is always going to have more nutrient value than the farmed fish. This is something that you can do when you go to your grocer and ask for, to look at wild-caught versus farmed salmon. The color difference between them is significant. More and deeper colors are going to be equal more nutrient value. And so that's going to be very important. Same thing when you're talking about eggs. If you look at a farmed or kind of CAFO type chicken environment versus looking at a free range chicken and looking at the eggs, when you crack open the egg and look at that yolk, distinct difference. There is much more nutrient value in that cage-free chicken egg than one that was raised in a more traditional farm, restricted type setting. Brazil nuts can be very important. They're a really good source of selenium. They have other nutrient value in it as well. If somebody is not diagnosed with issues with either autoimmune thyroiditis or issues with thyroid in general, 1 to 2 Brazil nuts a few times a week is going to be sufficient. If you have Hashimoto's or autoimmune thyroiditis, you're going to need more selenium because that selenium, like I said, is going to help to reduce that inflammation, help to reduce those antibodies that are circulating and inhibiting that thyroid hormone that you do make from being active. And so Brazil nuts about 4 to 5 times a week. If somebody does have issues with autoimmune thyroid disease and or thyroid disease in general, that is going to help support that thyroid. Now, zinc can also be a very important issue. And so zinc deficiency can be related to, worse thyroid function and hair loss as well. In addition, zinc is very important for hormone formation as well. Many of our nut varieties contain a fair amount of zinc, and there is a little bit of zinc within Brazil nuts as well. So with Brazil nuts, you get a 2-for-1, but some of the more higher containing sources of zinc are going to be beef, pumpkin seeds, chicken, nuts, legumes in general as well. Those are going to be really good sources for zinc. Obviously, doing a zinc supplement, doing a selenium supplement, those are all options, especially if you don't like any of those varieties of foods which we've discussed already. Now, other things to really look at when you're looking at thyroid health, and this is one of the things that I think has been so interesting. Worldwide, we've noted that the most common cause for thyroid deficiency is iodine. Really because people didn't have access to it, or diets would be very limited in the food sources for iodine. So really good sources of iodine are going to be like seafood, dairy, and eggs. Again, crossover with some of the other things that we've already talked about. And then seaweed. Seaweed actually can be really good. But this is why if you look at kind of your typical salt shaker that, historically maybe you've gotten in the past, would say iodized salt. Table salt typically is iodized. This is the reason. Because most of our issues with hypothyroidism were due to iodine deficiency within the diet. Iodine is a finicky thing. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You don't want too much, don't want too little. You need it to be just right. And the reason is that iodine, when it's too high or too low, can cause or worsen Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, either one. And so we really want to be careful, because also that excess iodine, it can kind of trigger hypo or hyperthyroidism and really increase those antibodies. And so, routinely just going straight to an iodine supplement is never something that I recommend. Generally speaking, I recommend that you get your iodine through your food sources, because that is going to be usually self-regulating to a good level. And there are cases in which we do need to increase iodine, especially during pregnancy. Increasing iodine is important as well. So many people will just start on the iodine drops and or an iodine oral supplement, or they'll decide they're going to, eat a lot of seaweed or kelp, IG, and they don't really need to do that. They could be making their situation worse. Now, what I recommend is that if you have a known thyroid issue, and or even if you don't, that you do get some iodine in your diet. Helpful foods, again, seafood, talking about shrimp, eggs, seaweed as well. But again, like with everything, when you start taking an extract or a supplement, it typically is going to be much, much more than what you actually need. In some cases, for some people, you do need a lot more. In many cases, you do not. And so one of the best ways to regulate is just make sure whatever salt you use to cook with, that it contains iodine. Now, a lot of people think that the sea salts and or things like Redmond salts and the nutrient value overall that you get is much better than table salt. And that absolutely is true. You get so much more from sea salt, manganese, chromium, all these different things, magnesium, that we don't get in regular table salt. Potassium even you get. But you're missing iodine. And iodine, if you do have issues with thyroid, is going to be critical for you helping to maintain that thyroid health, to help keep antibody levels low, not too high. And it is something that you want to look at, especially if you notice that your antibodies are going up, going down. That would be a good time to say, hey, where's my iodine at? What have I been doing? And so really iodine is going to be very important. And so iodine is one of those things that are really going to help. But iodine can't do it all by itself. It needs that selenium, it needs that zinc, it needs vitamin D. So even doing, and this isn't quote a food, but getting vitamin D supplementation is going to be very important. Let's face it, most of us don't spend nearly enough time out in the sun. And when we do, it's not at the times where we get that best vitamin D conversion from the sunlight, that first 45 minutes of sun or the last 45 minutes of the day. So really supplementing with vitamin D is also going to be very helpful as well. So that kind of brings us to a little bit of a close with specifics for the thyroid, but maintaining and making sure that you're getting a good fiber intake, a good, healthy, whole food intake is going to help balance the gut, which also is going to help with nutrient production, nutrient reabsorption, and balancing as you go through your day. So I hope that you found this beneficial. I hope that you see that there is value into really maintaining a whole foods diet. That's kind of the theme that you're seeing here, and reducing inflammation. And like we talked about in the last episode, thyroid is much like diabetes in that you need that metabolic reset. You need to control those blood sugar levels, which in turn helps to control inflammation, especially for somebody that has autoimmune related thyroid disease. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would welcome you to get on and start our metabolic reset. It will help balance that thyroid for you. There's a lot of really good information in there about thyroid, and we can tie our blood sugar regulation quite frequently to our thyroid regulation as well. So I hope this has been beneficial, and thanks, and God bless. Welcome to the Living Life Well show, the intersection of God's Word, today's science, and healthy living with common sense application, all based on the truth of the Word of God. I'm your host, Dr. John Skelton. Now let's get straight to the truth. That's it for this episode of the Living Life Well show. If you like what you've heard and want to learn more, or want to know how to put this into practice for yourself, go to livelifewellclinic.com. Until next time, this is Dr. John Skelton saying go out and live the truth so you can live life well. The preceding is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not meant to be used to prevent, diagnose, treat, or cure any condition. The information contained in this show does not substitute the need for a qualified medical professional, nor is it meant to provide medical advice or services. If you feel information presented in this show may apply to you, we recommend you seek out the help of a qualified medical professional who can evaluate and treat your specific concerns.